Hey, welcome back on tonight's episode of Cybersecurity Jobs. We're talking about tools engineering. Tools engineers, for the sake of this conversation, are kind of like the system administrators of our blue team, right? Their role is really to manage the tools that we utilize, or all the different members of the team utilize, without necessarily being, I'll say, functional experts in whatever the tool is supposed to deliver, right? So when we talk about a SIM, um, making sure a sim is collecting data properly, making sure you know how to integrate log sources, making sure you know how to rate detections, making sure you know how to use the sim is a different skill set than the actual analysis of events occurring. Um, they often go well together because being proficient at using your sim is a great way to be a good SOC analyst, but they require different skill sets. You don't necessarily need to be a really good Linux administrator to be a good SOC analyst. You probably do need to be a pretty good Linux administrator to be a good tools engineer. So we deal with similar overlaps and things like that, but the tools engineers are kind of a unique role. Not all organizations have them. Some people combine them with whoever is using the tool set also manages the tool set. Some organizations just roll tool engineering into a generic system administrator role that's doing a bunch of stuff for infrastructure. But tools engineering is, I think, a cool, unique role when implemented in larger organizations and one that I like. So I figured I'd talk about it a little bit. First off, what are the goals, right? What are the goals of a tools engineer? First and foremost is management and administration of your tool set. Is the tool set healthy? Is it patched? Is it functioning properly? There's nothing more embarrassing than running a vuln scan on an environment and then finding that your vuln scanner is actually out of date and needing to be patched. So managing those types of things is really, really important. Integrating tools, one of the best things you can do from a tool perspective is make sure that you're getting value out of all of the things you're using, and often making them work together is kind of like a multiplier, right? Especially if you're talking about things like data enrichment. You might have a really good vuln console that's going out and scanning for vulnerabilities, and you might have a sim being able to correlate data from the vulnerability scanner and what the sim is seeing. Very, very useful. So integration of tools, both internal and to third-party sources, when you're talking about things like threat feeds, all very, very important aspects of tool management. And then helping understand what functionality lives in which tool set and doing a gap analysis to figure out what you might need with feedback from the teams using the tools. Also, a very powerful thing tools engineers can do because they are there actually monitoring at a high level everything kind of available. One of the things that chews up budgets a lot is when you buy like two different tools because each has a unique feature, but they also have like 50% overlap. You get into this wonky spot where, one, from a procedural perspective, people might start using different tools for different things, which might get you to different places, right? Like if you're using that overlap area, you probably want to just pick one, even though another tool could do it for the sake of process and procedure and standardization. But the other thing you have to kind of figure out is value of the tool at that point. When you have tools with heavy overlap, you have to reconsider your value. You're not getting the full value out of a tool, so is it still worth what they're billing for? Is that one feature you need worth the cost if 70% of that what that tool does can be done somewhere else? And often you'll run into this where they're just really, really, really good at something, but maybe they're like second or third or fifth in line as far as quality of tools compared to another tool set. And you have to really decide, is it worth paying for two tools to get the maximum of those two features? Or is it okay to just have like a really good thing and then kind of an okay thing and just save the money for another tool or another person or whatever it might be? So tools engineers can help us make those analysis and reviews. Really important stuff. Um, Diving in, like what kind of tools are we talking about? In security, the main ones are going to be things like your SIM, your EDR, your MDR, your XDR, whatever you're using, vuln management tool sets, email security, forensics tools. Forensics ones are actually a big one because a lot of organizations, if you're, secure, relatively secure and lucky, you're not dealing with things like forensics and incident response all the time, which is awesome. The problem is if you don't have someone remembering to monitor and take care of those tool sets, when you do need them, they're going to be out of date, lost, not working properly. And that really sucks, right? Like it's kind of how you might have someone testing your fire extinguishers and things like that. You don't want to find out that your tool is broken when you actually need it for an emergency. So people to monitor your forensics tool sets, firing up those workstations every once in a while, making sure everything's up to date, making sure your licensing is working properly, your software packages are up to date, making sure if you're using hardware kit like write blockers, those things, where they are, where everything is, that, somebody didn't set up MFA to a phone they don't have anymore. all that kind of stuff. You need somebody to maintain all those things for in case of the emergency, so you can use them. Also, not on this list might be other things like a SOAR product or a SOAR platform. Sometimes there might be some kind of engagement with like a NAC platform or things like that. But it just really depends. Like they are kind of the masters of the tool universe, if you will, in the security program. But where certain tools land within an organization could vary. So these are some of the more common security focused tools you might deal with. From a career pathing perspective, there's a handful of places that you can kind of go to and come from. I think tools engineering is a really natural progression from somebody coming from a systems administrator background. We kind of talked about that with vulnerability management, where vuln engineers are the check against what used to be a system administrator remediating things. These tools engineers are really just specialized systems administrators, right? They're dealing with managing the functionality of a tool set maybe that they aren't even experts in. I kind of think back in the day, I used to manage things like SharePoint sites and implementing SharePoint servers or migrations to SharePoint Online when that came to the thing. I wasn't a web designer. I really wasn't anybody who was an expert in SharePoint, but I was an expert in building infrastructure to support software. And that's kind of how tools engineers look at things. Like I know functionally where things are. I probably know the ins and outs of the tool set at an administrative level and perspective. But as far as like day to day use, there's probably better people than me who know the ins and outs of any given function, right? That's how tools engineering kind of works. So it is a natural slide for systems administrators, I think. For the ones who end up getting really specialized in their tool set, obviously navigating to who's using the tool is possible. You might decide that you really enjoy monitoring a SIM and managing a SIM, and maybe you want to be an analyst. Um, Good analysts obviously know how to use their tool set really well. It's a very powerful thing to do, but they may not be experts in actually standing up the tool set, right? They may understand how to navigate their SIM, but installing it, getting it to collect data properly, normalizing logs, doing integrations with other data sources, they probably don't know any of that stuff. And similarly, a really good tools engineer or SIM engineer probably or may not be a really good analyst, right? They're not there hypothesizing on what happened. They're not there chasing down what the actual logs mean necessarily or what the actions taken were or things like that. They're just different functions, even though they were in the same kind of work environment. General security architecture, right? Once you've been navigating around tools for a long time, you're seeing how things integrate. It kind of is that generic Sys admin background with a security focus. General security architecture could be a thing. Getting into like detection writing and things like that is also pretty natural for a lot of tools engineers and something they many times end up doing, as well as helping tune things like virus solutions or EDRs and things like that. So lots of kind of ways to shift around once you're in the role. It just depends on what you kind of want to end up doing. And from an entry level perspective, you can generally enter from any of these roles as well. It's kind of a lateral into this position, but you can definitely also move in from a non-security functional role. And I think that's good because a lot of people are always asking, how do you get into security? Look for roles like this. You don't have to be a security expert to learn how to manage a tool set, although you can definitely help yourself by learning, how does a SIM work? How does a vuln management tool work? Things like that. All right. Um, Tools engineer training. I'm going to just leave that. It says vuln engineer because I didn't clean up the slide. But basically, this is similar, right? It falls into the same category of you have tool specific training that you need to kind of dive into. That's going to vary depending on the tool stack you're managing. If you're using Tenable, you would do Tenable training. If you're using Elastic, you would do Elastic architecture or engineering training. If you're using Splunk, you would do Splunk training and so on. From a generic perspective, a good understanding of infrastructure management, virtualization, cloud resourcing, things like that comes very, very handy. And then just any general security training, right? Obviously, understanding the day to day of how a SOC analyst uses a tool will help you manage the tool better because you know kind of what's expected. Understanding how an EDR is deployed, how it's responded to, helps you kind of manage those tool sets better, even if you're not an expert in the response portions of them. But security training around those kinds of things is always pretty helpful. All right. And that is our tools engineer kind of summary for the night. Again, pretty valuable position, maybe one that people don't think of when they think of getting into cybersecurity, but don't sleep on it, man. Go take a look, see if you kind of see these roles out there. If you're a sysadmin currently and you want to start focusing on security stuff, go download demos of SIM products, go take some training. There's a lot of good organizations out there that offer training around these tool sets. Even the vendors themselves typically have free introductory training and free demos. Go utilize all that stuff. It helps. Have a great night, everybody.